So how does a person, an intelligent, educated person, come to believe that a monstrous act isn't just possible, but absolutely necessary? That's the terrifying question right at the heart of Dostoevsky's masterpiece, Crime and Punishment. In this explainer, we're going to trace the anatomy of that terrible idea as it takes root and grows in the mind of the protagonist, Raskolnikov. So what is it that pushes someone over the edge? Well, to really get this book, you first have to understand the man who wrote it. Dostoevsky's own life was just this crucible of suffering, and it's really the key that unlocks the brutal psychology of his novel. You see, Crime and Punishment wasn't just written, it was practically forged in the fires of Dostoevsky's own agony. This wasn't some author imagining what suffering is like from a comfy study, oh no. He was intimately acquainted with the justice system, with total despair, and with just how fragile life can be. I mean, just look at this timeline of his life. It's staggering. In 1849, he's condemned to death. And I want you to really picture this. You're dressed in a death shroud, you're tied to a stake, and you're just waiting for the bullets. Then, at the absolute last second, the sentence is changed. This mock execution was a profound kind of psychological torture that haunted him forever. And after that, he had to endure 4 years of hard labor in Siberia. So the point is this. When Dostoevsky writes about the mind of a criminal, he's writing from a place of deep, deep personal trauma. Okay, so now let's meet the character who really embodies all of this torment, Rodion Raskolnikov. He lives in a suffocating world, both physically and mentally, and it's right there, in his coffin-like room, that his terrible idea starts to fester. This paints the picture of his world perfectly, doesn't it? He's trapped in this tiny attic room in the slums of St. Petersburg, absolutely crushed by debt, riddled with anxiety, and completely, utterly isolated. The text calls it an overstrained, irritable condition. And inside this claustrophobic pressure cooker, a hideous dream has been simmering away for a whole month. But the idea that's taken root in his mind is still kind of hazy, almost abstract. He's not really thinking of it as a concrete plan. Not yet. Instead, he calls it a dream or a fantasy, something he can just turn over in his mind without any real consequences. Or at least that's what he tells himself. And this quote just perfectly captures what's going on inside his head. He's trying so hard to convince himself that this dark idea is just an idle thought, a plaything. But the very fact that he feels the need to dismiss it so forcefully, well, it shows you just how powerful a grip it already has on him. You can almost feel this self-deception. So, Raskolnikov finally leaves his little room, but stepping out into the streets of St. Petersburg offers zero relief. In fact, the world outside becomes this horrifying mirror, reflecting and just amplifying the darkness that's already brewing inside of him. He goes to see an old pawnbroker, supposedly to pawn his father's watch. But the book is crystal clear. This is a rehearsal. He's not just there for the money. He's taking mental notes, the layout of her apartment, where she keeps her keys, the fact that her much kinder sister, Elizaveta, isn't home. That plaything is starting to feel terrifyingly real. Next, he ends up in a tavern, and there he meets Marmeladov, a drunken, disgraced clerk, and this man gives voice to one of the book's core themes. He makes this razor-sharp distinction between just being poor and a state that is far, far worse, beggary. So what's the difference? Well, according to Marmeladov, in poverty you can still hold on to your nobility, your soul. But beggary, that's total degradation. That's when you're so beaten down that you are willing to humiliate yourself, to lose every last shred of dignity. And for Raskolnikov, it's a state he fears he is getting dangerously close to. And just get a load of the psychology behind this guy's drinking. He doesn't drink to forget his pain. He drinks to feel it more intensely. He actually seeks out suffering, believing it's his fate. It's this horrifying, twisted logic that really shows you the true depth of his despair. His whole rant builds up to this feverish religious vision. He imagines a God who doesn't reward the righteous, but who specifically calls forth the most wretched and ashamed people, the drunkards, the weak ones, precisely because they know they are unworthy. For Raskolnikov, who's listening to all this, it's this shocking idea of degradation being elevated to a kind of state of grace. Raskolnikov leaves the tavern and goes back to his miserable room. But then, a letter arrives from his mother. And this letter, this is the final pressure point. This is the thing that turns his abstract idea into what he starts to see as a terrible necessity.
The news in the letter can be seen in two completely different ways. On the one hand, you have his mother's hopeful view. His sister Dunya is marrying a rich guy, saving the family, a bright future. But then you see how Raskolnikov reads it. Dunya is selling herself to a man she despises. It's a vile bargain. His future is being bought with his sister's dignity, a fate in his mind that's no better than that of Sonia, the prostitute daughter of the drunkard he just met.
And he is absolutely tormented by this. It's not just any sacrifice, it's a sacrifice for him. He is the reason she is degrading herself, and he just cannot and will not accept it. All of a sudden, the abstract horror of suffering in the world has become intensely, agonizingly personal. So, under the crushing weight of his sister's sacrifice, the rational barriers in Raskolnikov's mind, they just start to shatter. His hideous dream is no longer a fantasy. It's starting to look like the only way out. Remember Marmeladov's desperate question from the tavern? It now echoes perfectly in Raskolnikov's own mind. He feels trapped. He refuses to let his sister sell herself to save him. But what other path is there? He truly feels like he has absolutely nowhere left to turn. And this total desperation leads him to his final, chilling rationalization. What if our moral laws are just artificial barriers, designed to keep the masses in check? What if extraordinary men are allowed to step over those barriers for a higher purpose? What if, to save his family and to achieve his own potential, this terrible act isn't a crime at all? What if it's all as it should be?